Welcome everyone to another reading stream. Now tonight, you can see in the title, it's just going to be chapter 3. Now chapter 3 is only about 15 pages long, so it is going to be on the short side for this stream. But the reason why I'm only reading one chapter tonight and then one chapter Thursday, at least for this week, is because the next chapter, The Siege of Gondor, is 24 pages. So I'll be reading chapter 3 tonight, which is 15 pages, which is the Muster of Rohan, and then progressing to the Siege of Gondor, which is chapter 4, and that's because that's about 23, 24 pages. So if I were to try to do both tonight, it would be pushing 40 pages. So that's why. And then what I'm going to do is I'm printing out these calendar pages, so that way I can just sit down and make note of what chapters I'm going to do on what days, because yeah, the chapter is fun sized. And thank you, your boy Smash JT, for the compliment on my behind. Appreciate it. But I'm gonna be actually sitting down and marking up these calendars, so that way I know, I keep a track of what chapters I'll be reading, so I can have a gauge of how long it's gonna take me to get through the Return of the King. Because next Tuesday I should be able to read like 2 or 3 chapters, because a couple of them are short. So that's why I need to and that's why I really need to print out the calendar so I can keep track. And actually, I'm going to be probably asking for a one of those those monthly or planner calendars for Christmas, so that way beginning next year for future reading streams, I'll be able to keep track of those. Yeah, I saw. I don't think we need anything, but it is what it is. But anyway, so let's just dive right in. Right, I had marked this for Mazza to read, and he's dodging like a dog. The Muster of Rohan, Chapter 3. Alright, so Gondor is called for aid, alliances are being formed, and Rohan musters. Now all roads were running together to the east to meet the coming of war and the onset of the shadow. And even as Pippin stood at the great gate of the city and saw the Prince of Dol Amroth ride in with his banners, the King of Rohan came down out of the hills. Day was waning. In the last rays of the sun, the riders cast long pointed shadows that went on before them. Darkness had already crept beneath the murmuring firwoods, or firwoods, I should say, that clothed the steep mountainsides. The king rode now slowly at the end of the day. Presently, the path turned round a huge bare shoulder of rock and plunged into the gloom of soft sighing trees. Down, down they went in a long winding file. When at last they came to the bottom of the gorge, they found that evening had fallen in the deep places. The sun was gone, twilight lay upon the waterfalls. All day, far below all day far below them, a leaping stream had run down from the high pass behind, cleaving its narrow way between pine-clad walls, and now through a stony gate it flowed out and passed into a wider vale. The riders followed it, and suddenly Parodale lay before them, loud with the noise of waters in the evening. There the white snowborn, joined by the lesser stream, went rushing, fuming on the stones, down to Edoras, and the green hills and the plains. Away to the right at the head of the great dale, the mighty Starkhorn loomed up above its vast buttresses, swathed in cloud, but its jagged peak, clothed in everlasting snow, gleamed far above the world, blue shadowed upon the east, red stained by the sunsets in the west. It's a new feature on StreamYard. I might turn that off. I just selected it for this stream because I wasn't sure what it would look like if it's if it went to YouTube 2 different ways or something like that, or what. It's a new feature on StreamYard, basically, called Mars. And it allows you to stream both horizontally and vertically. And I might turn that off next stream. I wasn't, like I said, I was just experiment this week. It's an experiment this week, so I don't know how it's gonna look, so. If you're on your phone, it might be vertical mode. It might be for phones, basically, so someone's watching on their phone. So YouTube short. Well, it's not gonna be a short. I might private the short or something if I can. But next time I'm going to turn it off because I wasn't sure exactly what it entailed. Mary looked out in wonder upon the strange country, of which he had heard many tales upon their long road. It was a skyless world in which his eye, through dim gulfs of shadowy air, saw only ever-mounting slopes, great walls of stone behind great walls, and frowning precipices wreathed with mist. He sat for a moment half dreaming, listening to the noise of water, the whisper of dark trees, the crack of stone, and the vast waiting silence that brooded behind all sound. He loved mountains, or he had loved the thought of them marching on the edge of stories brought from far away, but now he was borne down by the insupportable weight of Middle-earth. He longed to shut out the immensity in a quiet room by a fire. He was very tired, for though they had ridden slowly, they had ridden with very little rest. Hour after hour, for nearly 3 weary days, he had jogged up and down, over passes and through long dales, and across many streams. Sometimes where the way was broader, he had ridden at the king's side, not noticing that many of the riders smiled to see the two together, the hobbit on his little shaggy gray pony, and the Lord of Rohan on his great white horse. Then he had talked to Theoden, telling him about his home and the doings of the Shire folk, or listening in turn to tales of the Mark and its mighty men of old. But most of the time, especially on this last day, Merry had ridden by himself just behind the king, saying nothing, and trying to understand the slow, sonorous speech of Rohan that he heard the men behind him using. It was a language in which there seemed to be many words that he knew, that was spoken more richly and strongly than in the Shire, yet he could not piece the words together. At times, some rider would lift up his clear voice in stirring song, and Merry felt his heart leap, though he did not know what it was about. All the same, he had been lonely, and never more so than now at the day's end. He wondered where in all this strange world Pippin had got to, and what would become of Aragorn, and Legolas, and Gimli. Then suddenly, like a cold touch on his heart, he thought of Frodo and Sam. "I'm forgetting them," he said to himself reproachfully, "and yet they are more important than all the rest of us. And I came to help them, but now they must be hundreds of miles away if they are still alive." He shivered. Welcome, everyone. "Harrowdale, at last," said Eomer. "Our journey is almost at end." They halted. The paths out of the narrow gorge fell steeply. Only a glimpse, as through a tall window, could be seen of the great valley and the gloaming below. A single small light could be seen twinkling by the river. "This journey is over, maybe," said Theoden, "but I have far yet to go. 2 nights ago the moon was full, and in the morning I shall ride to Edoras, to the gathering of the Mark. But if you would take my counsel," said Eomer in a low voice, "you would then return hither until the war is over, lost or won." Theoden smiled. "Nay, my son, for so I will call you. Speak not the soft words of Worm-tongue in my old ears." He drew himself up, looked back at the long line of his men fading in the dusk behind. "Long years in the space of days it seems since I rode west, but never will I lean on a staff again. If the war is lost, what good will be my hiding in the hills? And if it is won, what grief will it be, even if I fall, spending my last strength? But we will leave this now. Tonight I will lie in the hold of Dunharrow. One evening of peace at least is left us. Let us ride on." In the deepening dusk they came down into the valley. Here the Snowborn flowed near to the western walls of the dale, and soon the path led them to a ford where the shallow waters murmured loudly on the stones. The ford was guarded. As the king approached, many men sprang up out of the shadow of the rocks, and when they saw the king they cried with glad voices, "Theoden King! Theoden King! The king of the Mark returns!" Then one blew a long call on a horn. It echoed in the valley. Other horns answered it, and lights shone out across the river. And suddenly there rose a great chorus of trumpets from high above, sounding from some hollow place, as it seemed, that gathered their notes into one voice and sent it rolling and beating on the walls of the stone. So the king of the Mark came back victorious out of the west to Dunharrow, beneath the feet of the White Mountains. There he found the remaining strength of his people, already assembled, for as soon as his coming was known, captains rode to meet him at the ford, bearing messages from Gandalf. Dunhir, chieftain of the folk of Harrowdale, was at their head. "At dawn 3 days ago, Lord," he said, "Shadowfax came like a wind out of the west to Edoras, and Gandalf brought tidings of your victory to gladden our hearts. But he brought also word from you to hasten the gathering of the riders, and then came the Winged Shadow." "The Winged Shadow?" said Theoden. "We saw it also, but that was in the dead of night, before Gandalf left us." "Maybe, Lord," said Dunhir. "Yet the same or another like to it, a flying darkness in the shape of a monstrous bird passed over Ezoras, that morning, and all men were shaken with fear. For it stooped upon Meduseld, and as it came low, almost to the gable, there came a cry that stopped our hearts. Then it was that Gandalf counseled us not to assemble in the fields, but to meet you here in the valley under the mountains. And he bade us to kindle no more lights or fires than barest need asked. So it has been done. Gandalf spoke with great authority. We trust that it is you. Sorry, we trust that it is as you would wish. Naught has been seen in Hatterdale of these evil things. It is well, said Theoden. I will ride now to the hold, and there before I go to rest I will meet the marshals and captains. Let them come to me as soon as it may be. The road now led eastward, straight across the valley, which was at that point little more than half a mile in width. Flats and meads of rough grass, gray now in the falling nights, lay all about. But in the front, on the far side of the dale, Merry saw a frowning wall, a last outlier of the great roots of the Starkborn, cloven by the river in ages past. On all the level spaces, there was great concourse of men. Some thronged to the roadside, hailing the king and the riders from the west with glad cries, but stretching away into the distance behind there were ordered rows of tents and booths, and lines of picketed horses, and great store of arms, and piled spears bristling like thickets of new planted trees. Now all the great assembly was falling into shadow, and yet, though the night chill blew cold from the heights, no lanterns glowed, no fires were lit. Watchmen heavily cloaked paced to and fro. Merry wondered how many riders there were. He could not guess their number in the gathering gloom, but it looked to him like a great army, many thousands strong. While he was peering from side to side, the king's party came up under the looming cliff on the eastern side of the valley, and there suddenly the path began to climb, and Merry looked up in amazement. He was on a road, the like of which he had never seen before, a great work of men's hands and years beyond the reach of song. Upwards it wound, coiling like a snake, boring its way across the sheer slope of rock. Steep as a stair, it looped backwards and forwards as it climbed. Up its horses could walk, and wains could be slowly hauled, but no enemy could come that way except out of the air, if it was defended from above. At each turn of the road there was great standing stones that had been carved in the likeness of men, huge and clumsy limbed, squatting cross-legged with their stumpy arms folded on fat bellies. Some in the wearing of the years had lost all features save the dark holes of their eyes that still stared sadly at the passers-by. The riders hardly glanced at them. The Pukelamen, they called them, and heeded them little. No power or terror was left in them, but Merry gazed at them with wonder and a feeling almost of pity, as they loomed up mournfully in the dusk. After a while, he looked back and found that he had already climbed some hundreds of feet above the valley, but still far below he could dimly see a winding line of riders, crossing the ford and filing along the road towards the camp prepared for them. Only the king and his guard were going up into the hold. At last the king's company came to a sharp brink, and the climbing road passed into a cutting between walls of rock, and so went up a short slope and out onto a wide upland. The Fierenfeld men called it, a great mountain field of grass and heath, high above the deep-delved courses of the Snowborn, laid upon the lap of the great mountains behind. The Starkhorn southwards and northwards, the saw-toothed mass of Irensaga, between which they faced the riders, the grim black wall of the Dwimmelberg, the haunted mountain rising out of a steep slope of somber pines. Dividing the upland into two, there marched a double line of unshaped standing stones that dwindled into the dusk and vanished in the trees. Those who dared to follow the road came soon to the black Dimholt under Dimmelberg, and the menace of the pillar of stone, and the yawning shadow of the forbidden door. Such was the dark Dunharrow, the work of long-forgotten men. Their name was lost, and no song or legend remembered it. For what purpose they had made this place, as a town or a secret temple or a tomb of kings, none in Rohan could say. Here they labored in the dark years, before ever a ship came to the western shores, or Gondor the Dunedain was built. And now they had vanished, and only the old Pukkelmen were left, still sitting at the turnings of the road. Merry stared at the lines of marching stones. They were worn and black, some were leaning, some were fallen, some cracked or broken. They looked like rows of old and hungry teeth. He wondered what they could be, and he hoped that the king was not going to follow them into the darkness beyond. Then he saw that there were clusters of tents and booths on either side of the stony way, but they were not set near the trees, and seemed rather to huddle away from them towards the brink of the cliff. The greater number were on the right, where the Fehrenfeld was wider, and on the left there was a smaller camp, in the midst of which stood a tall pavilion, From this side, a rider came out to meet them, and they turned from the road. As they drew near, Mary saw that the rider was a woman with long braided hair gleaming in the twilight, yet she wore a helm and was clad to the waist like a warrior, and girded with a sword. "Hail, Lord of the Mark," she cried, "my heart is glad at your returning." "And you, Eowyn," said Theoden, "is all well with you?" "All is well," she answered, yet it seemed to Mary that her voice belied her, and he would have thought that she had been weeping, if that could be believed of one so stern of face. All is well. It was a weary road for the people to take, torn suddenly from their homes. There were hard words, for it is long since war has driven us from the green fields, but there have been no evil deeds. All is now ordered, as you see, and your lodging is prepared for you, for I have had full tidings of you and knew the hour of your coming." "So Aragorn has come then," said Eomer. "Is he still here?" "No, he is gone," said Eowyn, turning away and looking at the mountains dark against the east and south. "Whither did he go?" asked Eomer. "I do not know," she answered. "He came at night and rode away yester morn, ere the sun had climbed over the mountain tops. He is gone." "You are grieved, daughter," said Theoden. "What has happened? Tell me, did he speak of that road?" He pointed away along the darkening lines of stones towards the Dimmerberg, of the paths of the dead. "Yes, Lord," said Eowyn. Sorry. Time of year when it's not just allergies, it's cold. Said Eowyn, "and he has passed into the shadow from which none have returned. I could not dissuade him. He is gone." "Then our paths are sundered," said Eomer. "He is lost. We must ride without him, and our hope dwindles." Slowly they passed through the short heath and upland grass, speaking no more until they came to the king's pavilion. There Mary found that everything was made ready, and that he himself was not forgotten. A little tent had been pitched for him beside the king's lodging, and there he sat alone while men passed to and fro, going in to the king and taking counsel with him. Night came on, and the half-seen heads of the mountains westward were crowned with stars, but the east was dark and blank. The marching stones faded slowly from sight, and still beyond them, blacker than the gloom, brooded the vast crouching shadow of Grimmerberg. I have allergies year-round. I have indoor allergies and outdoor allergies. So, but now it's really cold. We got like down to the 30s, feels like the 20s today, basically. So it's pretty much flu and cold season now. "The paths of the dead," he muttered to himself. "The paths of the dead. What does all this mean? They have all left me now. They have all gone to some doom. Gandalf and Pippin to war in the east, and Sam and Frodo to Mordor, and Strider and Legolas and Gimli to the paths of the dead. But my turn will come soon enough, I suppose. I wonder what they are all talking about, and what the king means to do, for I must go where he goes now." Again, welcome everyone. Oh yeah, Jam. In the midst of these gloomy thoughts, he suddenly remembered that he was very hungry, and he got up to go and see if anyone else in the strange camp felt the same. But at that very moment a trumpet sounded, and a man came summoning him, the king's esquire, to wait at the king's board. In the inner part of the pavilion was a small space, curtained off with bordered hangings and strewn with skins, and there at a small table sat Theoden with Eomer and Eowyn, and Dunher, lord of Harodale. Mary stood beside the king's stool and waited on him, till presently the old man, coming out of a deep thought, turned to him and smiled. "Come, Master Meriadoc," he said, "you shall not stand. You shall sit beside me as long as I remain in my own lands, and lighten my heart with tales." Room was made for the hobbit at the king's left hand, but no one called for any tale. There was indeed little speech, and they ate and drank for the most part in silence, until at last, plucking up courage, Mary asked the question that was tormenting him. "Twice now, Lord, I have heard of the paths of the dead," he said. "What are they? And where is Strider? I mean, the Lord Aragorn. Where is he gone?" The king sighed, but no one answered until at last Eomer spoke. "We do not know, and our hearts are heavy," he said. "But as for the paths of the dead, you have yourself walked on their first steps. Nay, I speak no words of ill omen. The road that we have climbed is the approach to the door, yonder in the Dimmels. For what lies beyond, no man knows." "No man knows," said Theoden. "Yet ancient legend, now seldom spoken, has somewhat to report. If these old tales speak true that have come down from father to son in the house of the Earl, then the door down Drummelberg leads to a secret way that goes beneath the mountains to some forgotten end. But none have ever ventured in to search its secrets, since Boldor, son of Brego, passed the door and was never seen among men again. A rash vow he spoke as he drained the horn at the feast which Brego made to hollow new-built Meduseld. And he came never to the high seat of which he was the heir." Folks say that dead men out of the dark years guard the way and will suffer no living man to come to their hidden halls. But at whiles they may themselves be seen passing out of the door like shadows and down the stony road. Then the people of Harrowdale shut fast their doors and shroud their windows and are afraid. But the dead come seldom forth, and only at times of great unquiet and coming death. Yet it is said in Harrowdale, said Eowyn in a low voice, that in the moonless nights, but little while ago, a great host in strange array passed by. Whence they came none knew, but they went up the stony road and vanished into the hill, as if they went to keep a tryst. Remember, knew Aragorn traveled the paths of the dead to confront those dead who broke an oath a long time ago. He's the only one that can, well, not necessarily control them, but command them. So when she's mentioning this, that's when Aragorn was like traveling, basically. So that host was the dead army following Aragorn. Then why has Aragorn gone that way, asked Merry. Don't you know anything that would explain it? Unless he has spoken words to you as his friend that we have not heard, said Eomer, none now in the land of the living can tell his purpose. Greatly changed he seemed to me since I saw him first in the king's house, said Eowyn. Grimmer, older. Fey, I thought him, and like one whom the dead call. Maybe he was called, said Theoden, and my heart tells me that I shall not see him again. Yet he is a kingly man of high destiny. And take comfort in this, daughter, since comfort you seem to need in your grief for this guest. It is said that when the Arrowlings came out to the north and passed at length up the Snowbourn, seeking strong places of refuge in time of need, Brago and his son Boldor climbed the stair of the hold and so came before the door. On the threshold sat an old man, aged beyond guess of years. Tall and kingly he had been, but now he was withered as an old stone. Indeed, for stone they took him, for he moved not, and he said no word until they sought to pass him by an enter. And then the voice came out of him, as if it were out of the ground, and to their amaze it spoke in the western tongue. The way is shut. I'm going to take a break here and take a swig of water. Well, Mike, that never happened in the book. That sword was reforged, basically, because, well, Aragorn is kind of like, returning as king. So, her idea? No. No, our one in the book is like last seen in Rivendell, basically waving them off as they continue their journey. And you don't see her, really, until like the last part of the last book. So it wasn't her idea. It wasn't her idea. They made it her idea because strong women. Anyway. Because they're, like, despite my love for the Lord of the Rings movies, there are some parts I have major issues with. And that's one of them. They gave Arwen more... How do I put this? They added so much to her character that never happened. So no uplifting speech from Elrond. Nothing. That's completely fabricated. That's completely fabricated. It's like, basically, it's like also no Arwen journey to the Grey Havens and then turning back, basically. Yeah, they're giving her more agency in the movie, basically. Which, certain things I'm kind of fine with, basically, but for the most part, I'm like, what? What? Even I, like I said, as much as I love those movies, even I'm like just, like the gifts you see where they're like, that's what I'm like. She's barely in the book. She's barely in the book. But she's important. Don't get me wrong. She's important because she's she's a connection to Aragorn, but nowhere near as important as what they made her in the movies. Nothing. Anyway, my little rant over. Back to the story. All right. Then they halted and looked at him and saw that he lived still, but he did not look at them. The way is shut, his voice said again. It was made by those who are dead, and the dead keep it until the time comes. The way is shut. And when will that time be? Said Boldor. But no answer did he ever get, for the old man died in that hour and fell upon his face, and no other tidings of ancient dwellers in the mountains have our folk ever learned. Yet maybe at last the time foretold has come, and Aragorn may pass. But how shall a man discover whether that time has come or no, save by daring the door? Said Eomer. In that way I would not go through all... Though all the hosts of Mordor stood before me, and I were alone and had no other refuge. Alas, that a fey mood should fall on a man so great-hearted in this hour of need. Are there not evil things enough abroad without seeking them under the earth? War is at hand. He paused, for at that moment there was a noise outside, a man's voice crying the name of Theoden and the challenge of the guard. Presently, the captain of the guard thrust aside the curtain. A man is here, lord, he said, an errand rider of Gondor. He wishes to come before you at once. Let him come, said Theoden. A tall man entered, and Merry choked back a cry. For a moment it seemed to him that Boromir was alive again and had returned. Then he saw that it was not so. The man was a stranger, though as like to Boromir as if he were one of his kin, tall and gray-eyed and proud. He was clad as a rider, with a cloak of dark green over a coat of fine mail. On the front of his helm was wrought a small silver star. In his hand he bore a single arrow, black-feathered and barbed with steel, but the point was painted red. He sank on one knee and presented the arrow to Theoden. Hail, Lord of the Rohirrim, friend of Gondor, he said. Hurgon I am, errand rider of Denethor, who bring you this token of war. Gondor is in great need. Often the Rohirrim have aided us, but now the Lord Denethor asks for all your strength and all your speed, lest Gondor fall at last. The red arrow, said Theoden, holding it as one who receives a summons long expected and yet dreadful when it comes. His hand trembled. The red arrow has not been seen in the mark in all my years. Has it indeed come to that? And what does the Lord Denethor reckon that all my strength and all my speed may be? That is best known to yourself, Lord, said Hurgon, but ere long it may well come to pass that Minas Tirith is surrounded, and unless you have the strength to break a siege of many powers, the Lord Denethor bids me say that he judges that the strong arms of the Rohirrim would be better within his walls than without. But he knows that we are a people who fight rather upon horseback and in the open, and that we are also a scattered people, and a time is needed for the gathering of our riders. Is it not true, Hurgon, that the Lord of Minas Tirith knows more than he sets in his message? For we are already at war, as you may have seen, and you do not find us all unprepared. Gandalf the Grey has been among us, and even now we are mustering for battle in the east. What the Lord Denethor may know or guess of all these things I cannot say, answered Hurgon, but indeed our case is desperate. My lord does not issue any command to you. He begs you only to remember old friendship and oaths long spoken, and for your own good to do all that you may. It is reported to us that many kings have ridden in from the east to the service of Mordor. From the north to the field of Dagorlad, there's a skirmish and rumor of war. In the south, the Haradrim are moving, and fear has fallen on all our coastlands, so that little help will come to us thence. Make haste, for it is before the walls of Minas Tirith that the doom of our time will be decided, and if the tide be not stemmed there, then it will flow over all the fair fields of Rohan, and even in this hold among the hills there shall be no refuge. Dark tidings, said Theoden, yet not all is unguessed. But say to Denethor that even if Rohan itself felt no peril, still we would come to his aid. But we have suffered much loss in our battles with Sauron the traitor, and we must still think of our frontier to the north and east, as his own tidings make clear. So great a power as the Dark Lord seems now to wield might well contain us in battle before the city, and yet strike with great force across the river away from beyond the gates of kings. But we will speak no longer counsels of prudence. We will come. The weapon take was set for the morrow. When all is ordered, we will set out. 10,000 spears I might have sent riding over the plain to the dismay of your foes. It will be less now, I fear, for I will not leave my strongholds all unguarded. Yet 6,000 at the least shall ride behind me. For say to Denethor that in this hour the king of the Mark himself will come down to the land of Gondor, though maybe he will not ride back. But it is a long road, and man and beast must reach the end with strength to fight. A week it may be from tomorrow's morn ere you hear the cry of the sons of Earl coming from the north. A week, said Hurgon. If it must be so, it must. But you are like to find only ruined walls in 7 days from now, unless other help unlooked for comes. Still you may at the least disturb the orcs and swarthy men from their feasting in the White Tower. At the least, we will do that, said Theoden. But I myself am new come from battle and long journey, and I will now go to rest. Tarry here this night. Then you shall look on the muster of Rohan, and ride away the gladder for the sight, and the swifter for the rest. In the morning counsels are best, and night changes many thoughts. With that the king stood up, and they all rose. Go now, each to your rest, he said, and sleep well. And you, Master Meriadoc, I need you no more tonight, but be ready to my call as soon as the sun is risen. I will be ready, said Merry, even if you bid me ride with you on the path of the dead. Speak not words of omen, said the king, for there may be more roads than one that could bear that name. But I did not say that I would bid you ride with me on any road. Good night. I won't be left behind to be called for on return, said Merry. I won't be left, I won't. And repeating this over and over again to himself, he fell asleep at last in his tent. Well, no, it's not a movie invention then, basically. That's happened, it just happened kind of if you for like a film terminology off screen, basically. So Gondor up to this point had already lit the beacons, basically. Alright, they had already lit the beacons. And had already called for aid, and other leaders, alright, other kings have marched in service of Gondor, basically. So this has already happened. They showed it in the movie. So it could look epic, basically. So like, because of where Gondor has all their beacons, basically, essentially. But in the book, they kind of like mention it. Oh, like, Gondor's already lit the beacons. So Gondor's already calling for aid, sort of situation. So, not that it didn't happen. Not that it was just for the movie. It just was shown in the movie, unlike in the book. He was wakened by a man shaking him. Wake up, Master Holbitla, he cried, and at length Merry came out of deep dreams and sat up with a start. It still seemed very dark, he thought. What's the matter, he asked. The king calls for you. But the sun has not risen yet, said Merry. No, and will not rise today, Master Holbitla. Nor ever again, one would think, under this cloud. But time does not stand still, though the sun be lost. Make haste. Flinging on some clothes, Merry looked outside. The world was darkling. The very air seemed brown, and all things about were black and gray and shadowless. There was a great stillness. No shape of cloud could be seen, unless it was far away westward, where the furthest groping fingers of that great gloom still crawled onwards, and a little light leaked through them. Overhead there hung a heavy roof, somber and featureless, and light seemed rather to be failing than growing. Yeah, they've already known that they need help, basically, so they've already lit the beacons. Merry saw many folk standing, looking up and muttering. All their faces were gray and sad, and some were afraid. With a sinking heart, he made his way to the king. Ergon, the rider of Gondor, was there before him, and beside him now stood another man, like him, and dressed alike, but shorter and broader. As Merry entered, he was speaking to the king. It comes from Mordor, lord, he said. It began last night at sunset. From the hills in the eastfold of your realm, I saw it rise and creep across the sky, and all night, as I rode, it came behind, eating up the stars. Now the great cloud hangs over all the land between here and the mountains of shadow, and it is deepening. War has already begun. For a while the king sat silent. At last he spoke. So we come to it in the end, he said, the great battle of our time, in which many things shall pass away, but at least there is no longer need for hiding. We will ride the straight way in the open road and with all our speed. The muster shall begin at once, and wait for none that tarry. Have you good store in Minas Tirith? For if we must ride now in all haste, then we must ride light, with but meal and water enough to last us into battle. We have very great store long prepared, answered Ergon. Ride now as light as swift as you may. See, the thing is, Gondor, first off, Minas Tirith, I'm going to have to show you guys a map again, alright? Even if Gondor knew that Rohan needed aid, there's no way that they could have spared any men. Minas Tirith is literally on the border of Mordor. They are pretty much the line of defense directly where Mordor begins. So even if Rohan had called for it, which Rohan didn't do, basically, because no one's really going to know unless you enter Rohan what's going on, there's no way Gondor could have spared their men. So, this is one thing I don't like about the movies. It's made it seem like Denethor just completely ignored Rohan. And it's like, no, they can't. They can't spare any men. They need like as many men as they can protecting Minas Tirith, and then other men, like say Faramir and his men, basically they're spread out, basically. So, what's Gondor going to do? You're saying like Theoden's saying it'll take a week to get there. I'm just gonna. I'll just do it after the end of the stream, basically. So, then call the heralds, Éomer, said Theoden. Let the riders be marshaled. Éomer went out, and presently the trumpets rang in the hold, and were answered by many others from below. But their voices no longer sounded clear and brave as they seemed to Merry the night before. Dull they seemed and harsh in the heavy air, braying ominously. So, the king turned to Merry. I am going to war, Master Meriadoc, he said. In a little while I shall take the road. I release you from my service, but not from my friendship. You shall abide here, and if you will, you shall serve the Lady Éowyn, who will govern the folk in my stead. We all know what Éowyn does. But, my lord, Merry stammered, I offered you my sword. I do not want to be parted from you like this, Theoden King. As all my friends have gone to the battle, I should be ashamed to be left stay behind. We would ride on horses tall and swift, said Theoden, and great though your heart be, you cannot ride on such beasts. Then tie me on to the back of one, or let me hang on a stirrup or something, said Merry. It is a long way to run, but run I shall, if I cannot ride, even if I wear my feet off and arrive weeks too late. Theoden smiled. Rather than that, I would bear you with me on Snowmane, he said. But at the least, you shall ride with me to Edoras and look on Meduseld. For that way I shall go. So far, Stibba can bear you. The great race will not begin until we reach the plains. Pretty much. So, I'll show you guys a map again. So, I'll show you guys a map again, Then Éowyn rose up. Come now, Meriadoc, she said. I will show you the gear that I have prepared for you. They went out together. This request only did Aragorn make to me, said Éowyn, as they passed among the tents, that you should be armed for battle. I have granted it as I could, for my heart tells me that you will need such gear ere the end. Now she led Merry to a booth among the lodges of the king's guard, and there an armorer brought out to her a small helm, and a round shield and other gear. No mail have we to fit you, said Éowyn, nor any time for the forging of such a hauberk. But here is also a stout jerkin of leather, a belt and a knife, a sword you have. Merry bowed, and the lady showed him the shield, which was like the shield that had been given to Gimli, and it bore on it the device of the white horse. Take all these things, she said, and bear them to good fortune. Farewell now, Master Meriadoc. Yet maybe we shall meet again, you and I. Hint, hint. So it was that amid a gathering gloom, the King of the Mark made ready to lead all his riders on the eastward road. Hearts were heavy, and many quailed in the shadow. But they were a stern people, loyal to their lord, and little weeping or murmuring was heard, even in the camp and in the hold where the exiles from Edoras were housed. Women and children and old men. Doom hung over them, but they faced it silently. 2 swift hours passed, and now the king sat upon his white horse, glimmering in the half-light. Proud and tall he seemed, though the hair that flowed beneath his high helm, was like snow, and many marveled at him, and took heart to see him unbent and unafraid. There on the wide flats beside the noisy river were marshalled in many companies, well nigh 55 hundreds of riders fully armed, and many hundreds of other men with spare horses lightly burdened. A single trumpet sounded. The king raised his hand, and then silently the host of the mark began to move. Foremost went 12 of the king's household men, riders of renown. Then the king followed with Éomer on his right. He had said farewell to Éowyn in the hold, and the memory was grievous. But now he turned his mind to the road that lay ahead. Behind him, Merry rode on Stibba with the errand riders of Gondor, and behind them again 12 more of the king's household. They passed down the long ranks of waiting men with stern and unmoved faces. But when they had come almost to the end of the line, one looked up, glancing keenly at the hobbits. A young man, Merry thought as he returned the glance, less in height and girth than most. He caught the glint of clear gray eyes, and then he shivered, for it came suddenly to him that it was the face of one without hope who goes in search of death. On down the gray road they went beside the Snowbourn rushing on its stones, through the hamlets of the Underharrow and Upbourne, where many sad faces of women looked out from dark doors, and so without horn or harp or music of men's voices the great ride into the east began with which the songs of Rohan were busy for many long lives of men thereafter. From dark Dunharrow in the dim morning, with Thane and Captain rode, Thangol's son, to Edoras he came, the ancient halls. Sorry. Of the Mark Wardens, mist enshrouded, golden timbers were in gloom mantled. Farewell he bade to his free people, hearth and high seats in the hallowed places, where long he had feasted ere the light faded. Forth rode the king, fear behind him, fate before him. Fails he kept he, oaths he had taken, all fulfilled them. Forth rode Theoden, 5 nights and days, east and onward rode the Erolingas, through Fold and Fenmark, and the Fitternwood, 6,000 speared to Sunlanden. Mundberg, the mighty under Mindoluin. Sea King city in the South Kingdom, foe beleaguered, fire encircled. Doom drove them on, darkness took them. Horse and horsemen, hoofbeats afar, sank into silence, so the songs tell us. It was indeed in deepening gloom that the king came to Edoras, although it was then but noon by the hour. There he halted only short while, and strengthened by his host, by some 60 of riders that came late to the weapon take. Now having eaten, he made ready to set out again, and he wished his esquire a kind farewell, but Merry begged for the last time not to be parted from him. This is no journey for such steeds as Stebba, as I have told you, said Theoden, and in such a battle as we think to make on the fields of Gondor, what would you do, Master Meriadoc, sword thang though you be, and greater of heart than of stature? As for that, who can tell, answered Merry, but why, lord, did you receive me as a sword thane, if not to stay by your side? And I would not have it said of me in song, only that I was always left behind. I received you for your safe keeping, answered Theoden, and also to do as I might bid. None of my riders can bear you as a burden. If the battle were before my gates, maybe your deeds would be remembered by the minstrels, but it is 100 leagues and 2 to Mundberg, where the Denethor is lord. I will say no more. Merry bowed and went away unhappily, and stared at the lines of horsemen. Already the companies were preparing to start. Men were tightening girths, looking to saddles, caressing their horses. Some gazed uneasily at the lowering sky. Unnoticed, a rider came up and spoke softly in the hobbit's ear. Where will once not, a way opens, so we say, he whispered, and so I have found myself. Merry looked up and saw that it was the young rider whom he had noticed in the morning. You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes, I see it in your face. I do, said Merry. Then you shall go with me, said the rider. I will bury you before me, under my cloak, until we are far afield, and this darkness is yet darker. Such good will should not be denied. Say no more to any man, but come. Thank you indeed, said Merry. Thank you, sir, though I do not know your name. Do you not, said the rider softly? Then call me Durnhelm. Guess who it is. Thus it came to pass that when the king set out, before Durnhelm sat Meriadoc the Hobbit, and the great grey steed Windfulla made little of the burden, for Durnhelm was less in weight than many men, though lithe and well knit in frame. Guess who it is. On into the shadow they rode, and the willow thickets where Snowborn flowed into Entwash. 12 leagues east of Edoras they camped that night, and then on again, through the Fold, and through the Fenmarch, where to their right great oakwoods climbed on the skirts of the hills, under the shades of dark Halifrion, by the borders of Gondor. But away to their left the mist lay on the marshes fed by the mouths of Entwash. And as they rode, rumor came of war in the north. Lone men, riding wild, brought word of foes assailing their east borders, of orc hosts marching into the wold of Rohan. Ride on, cried Eomer. Too late now to turn aside. The fens of Entwash must guard our flank. Haste now we need, ride on. And so King Theoden departed from his own realm, and mile by mile the long road wound away, and the beacon hills marched past. Kellenhad, Minvrimon, Erlas, Nordal. But their fires were quenched. All the lands were grey and still, and ever the shadow deepened before them, and hope waned in every heart. And that is the muster of Rohan. Presently, on Thursday, we will enter the chapter, The Siege of Gondor. Yeah, so gee, I wonder who that was. I wonder who said to Merry, ride with me. I'll take you, ride with me. I wonder who that was. I wonder who that is. Anyway, just to give you, again, some perspective. He's fine in my history. Again, to give you a bit of perspective on where Minas Tirith is and where Edoras is, and so forth. Why it would not have made sense in this case, given like the locations for Gondor to come to Rohan's aid, especially because Gondor's not going to know. Gondor is not going to know. It's what was happening in Rohan was nefarious. Basically, it was manipulative. Basically, it was Saruman. Basically, his doings versus facing as many enemies as Gondor has. All right, now yes, Rohan had to fight, but like I said, given where Minas Tirith is, look, it's right here. This is the border. Here's Osgiliath. Basically, Osgiliath is right on the border of Gondor and Mordor. Gondor is pretty much the buttress for most places against Mordor for other places such as Rohan. So up here's where Edoras is. Here's Minas Tirith. Here's Edoras. Here's Helm's Deep. Here's Snowbourne, basically. So this is like, look at this distance. No matter how fast Rings of Power would like to make it seem in terms of travel in Middle-earth, there's no way that Gondor would have made it in time to aid Rohan. Rohan could handle itself. There's no way that would have made sense for Gondor to come to Rohan's aid at this point. Like I said, Gondor is pretty much a buttress. Here's Mordor, and it's like between Mordor, Rohan. Let's roll up. Alright, there's Lorien. Where is it? Moria. Okay. Rivendell. Weathertop, the Shire. Gondor, like, I'm not trying to make it seem like, Gondor is ignoring everything else necessarily, but Gondor, given its location, has so much to deal with, so much to face. Whenever orcs leave Mordor, which way do they go? They go through Gondor. They attack Gondorians. They attack Gondor's people. They attack everyone living, even remotely close to Minas Tirith. Like, everywhere they travel. So basically, Gondor, like I said, is between Mordor and everywhere else. So if Gondor falls, Middle-earth falls. That's pretty much the way to look at it. That's why Gondor can't afford to come to anyone's aid. And it's not because they wouldn't do so. It's because they can't. It's because they can't. They can't spare any men. And the movies kind of make it seem like Denethor is just ignoring everyone else, basically. Denethor kind of gets the shaft in the movies. He kind of gets the shaft in the movies. He's not a perfect leader by any stretch of the word, basically. He has faults. He's imperfect. But, he does not willfully ignore everyone else. He just can't afford to shift his focus from his own people to everyone else, given where they're located. So if you can remember the map, basically, the distance Boromir had to travel just to get to Rivendell on his own. On his own. Because of how much he loved his people. Boromir even got the shaft a little bit in the movies too. He's like, you remember from the Fellowship of the Ring, basically, he's while he had a weak moment, he is strong of character. It's actually, in a way, stronger than Aragorn. So, I'm just saying, like, it's like, kind of like, keep in mind certain things, where it's like, if you're watching the movies, as much as I love them, if you're watching movies, it kind of makes certain things seem how they weren't in the books. Alright? So, Yeah, Peter Jackson, while he made in terms of adaptations, very good adaptations, he didn't understand certain things. He didn't understand certain things, or he willfully chose to ignore certain elements of the stories and change them for embellishment or tension or whatever you want to call it in terms of plot. But anyway, that is chapter 3, ladies and gentlemen, of Return of the King, at least book 5, part 1 of Return of the King. And this coming Thursday will be chapter 4, The Siege of Gondor. Like I said, I'm going to put together a schedule in a way so I can get a gauge of how long it's going to take to get through Return of the King based on how many chapters I can read at a time. Right, so I'm going to be printing out a couple calendars, November and December, so I can sit down at my desk, write down, okay, on this date will be this either chapter or chapters, and I'll have a clearer perspective, hopefully by Thursday, of when I'll be finishing Return of the King. Not that I'm looking forward to finishing Return of the King necessarily, necessarily wanting to, but I have other books that I would be doing reading streams on, and I would need to kind of know when I'd be able to start them. I'm thinking, probably, given the fact that they're doing another reboot of the first Halo game, even though they're removing multiplayer, campaign evolved, I'm thinking of reading instead the first book in the Halo series, The Fall of Reach. So, the actual Fall of Reach. So, either that or Starship Troopers, but I'm considering Campaign Evolved is coming out, so that's what I might do, is read the first book. Read the first Halo book. So, The Fall of Reach. But anyway, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow will be the Top 10 2004 stream, where Steve Kenobi and I discuss our own personal Top 10 2004 films. So, if you want to participate in the chat, you'll get your list together by 8 p.m. tomorrow on YouTube. Thursday, reading stream, basically Chapter 4, The Siege of Gondor and Return of the King. And then Friday, my plan is to play some Battlefield 6. I'm going to message my nerdy home to see if she's available Friday, possibly. John Connors is welcome to join. I've told him that he's more than welcome to jump in if he's available. For my Battlefield 6 playthrough, because Saturday I'm going to be potentially busy in the afternoons. I'm just going to be doing a Discord watch party of Breakfast Club Saturday evening. And then Sunday, no afternoon stream because it's difficult for me to go from D&D to a stream and then to talk nerdy. So if I do anything, it'll be offline Battlefield 6 if Steph plays. So appreciate it, Citizen Ronan. Yes, happy Veterans Day to everyone. So again, on that note, you're making Tyler watch that movie. So, it's a good movie. It's a good movie, and it teaches, has a universal message without beating you over the head with it. Anyway, again, on that long outro, have a good rest of your day or evening wherever you are in the world, and I will see you all tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. on YouTube for our own personal Top 10 2004 films. Good night, stay safe, and peace.